Hi everyone. I want you to listen to this video on how rock oil lights up the world, and you need to read this particular section, which is chapter 16, section 2, and take notes on it. I don't want you to write down everything on the PowerPoint, but you can use any of that information to add to your notes that you want. And you can just type up your notes and then send them back to me, or if you want to handwrite them out and then upload a picture, it's totally up to you. Whatever is fine with you is fine with me. So let's talk about how rock oil lights up the world. And once again, you don't have to write these down. This is just a review of the notes that you summarized. Add to your own notes if you need to, but you don't have to rewrite these. So let's get started. Rock oil lights up the world. So in the good old days, prior to the Civil War, Americans did not light their houses at night. They used various oils to bring light to the darkness. So camphene oil was an example, which was a mixture of turpentine from pine trees and kerosene, but it was pretty dangerous actually. And then in the mid 1850s, George H. Bissell, formed the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company in western Pennsylvania, where oil was found. Rock oil was originally used for medicine. He actually hired this guy named Benjamin Silliman. He was a Yale chemistry professor to research what else rock oil could be used for. And Silliman actually found rock oil, or petroleum, made excellent lamp oil. It was bright with little smoke and non-explosive. Two big things that you actually want in your house: a non-exploding smoke-filled lamp. I also found it to be a great lubricant for wheels and gears so machines could run quietly, smoothly, and not wear out. So this guy, Silliman, he researched a bunch of different ways to use rock oil or petroleum, and he found a bunch of different ways to use it, which was really great. The rock oil could then be sold in large quantities. Bissell learned to bore for oil and pump it up from the ground. So that means it was down deep and he had to bring it up to the surface. A guy named Edwin L. Drake rode the railroad to western Pennsylvania. He had to choose a town closest to the biggest findings of the surface oil. Uncle Billy Smith helped make drilling tools, and together they drilled 70 feet and returned to find oily black stuff. The oily black stuff was, for them, hitting the lotto, black gold, and after this, oil mania ensued. John D. Rockefeller eventually set up his Standard Oil Company. A little bit of background about him: he grew up in Cleveland and was left in charge of his family. He was a very good organizer. He used Cleveland to become the center of the oil business due to receiving end of two east-west railroads and a lake big enough for large ships. That just means that Cleveland connected the east to the west, and there was a railroad that could go to the eastern part of the country, a railroad that could go to the western part of the country, and there was the lake right there too, Lake Erie. So that was really important for transportation purposes as well. He ended up buying a Cleveland oil refinery in 1865 and other refineries in Cleveland and oil wells in Pennsylvania. So he bought one main oil refinery in Cleveland, and then he eventually started moving out more and more and buying these other oil refineries, just adding to his revenue essentially. The railroads needed Rockefeller freight to sustain business as other oilmen went out of business. So Rockefeller was a very lewd businessman, and we're going to come to find out a little bit of what he did. But the railroads ended up really depending on Rockefeller, and so they were in his back pocket, and he was in their back pocket because he provided them so much business, and in return, he got his oil shipped all over the country. And he could do this by making more money, which ultimately led to other oil men losing out on their jobs. So what ended up happening with Rockefeller is that he made two big railroads in Cleveland compete for his business. He drove the competition between these two different railroads. He bargained with one by threatening to give all his business to the other. Today, that's very illegal. You cannot do that. But basically, there was Railroad A and Railroad B. He would tell Railroad A, if you don't give me the prices that I want, I'm going to give all my business to Railroad B. And he would tell Railroad B the same thing. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to give all my business to Railroad A. And since neither of them wanted to go out of business themselves, they would give in to his demands. So he would force them to charge him lower prices so he would get what he wanted. He had the secret arrangement that let him pretend to pay regular rates. Then the railroads gave him back a rebate, which was just a refund on each barrel of oil they hauled. So, by all intents and purposes, on paper, it looked like Rockefeller was paying the railroads the required amount, but he would make them give him a rebate or money back for each of the barrels of oil that they hauled. So he was getting a cheaper price. It just looked like he was paying more money for it. He received rebates on what opposing oil companies shipped. He would ask small refineries across the US to sell and then threaten to make them valueless because of his advantages with the other railroads. So he would offer these small refineries much less than what the owners thought they were worth. So he was bullying these other oil companies, these other oil refineries out of business. So he was forcing them to turn over their business to him, to Rockefeller himself, by making them powerless in a world where he had all the power with the oil and they had none. So a lot of these people would sell because Rockefeller could drive them out of business. There was no way that they could actually compete with him. And so they would sell their business to take that little money that they would get from him, and they would have to go try and start a new way of life for themselves. Eventually, Rockefeller organized his own oil pipeline. He hired chemical engineers to invent new refineries for different kinds of oil. So he was really expanding his business base. His business eventually reached worldwide, and he would sell inexpensive lamps and then oil to fill those lamps. So it wasn't just the lamps themselves, and it wasn't just the oil themselves, but he used these complementary products where you needed to have one in order to use the other. And he would sell his lamps and his oils, and he would make a lot of money off of this because they were relatively inexpensive for the whole world to be able to afford. And then in time, petroleum was eventually refined into gasoline. And then obviously we know how important gasoline is to us now and how much that could actually be worth. So that's all the notes that I have for you for right now. I'll be giving you more notes eventually in times to come. But like I said, I don't want you to have to write out all of these notes. This was supposed to be just a review of the notes that you already took on this. So I want you to watch this video and then just add to your own notes. And if you have questions about anything, just post them on our team's page and I'll make sure I answer them for you. All right, see you guys.